I guess I love getting negative comments and losing subscribers because I just can't stay away from controversial topics. I know there are a ton of people who absolutely despise player housing in MMOs, but I'm going to do my best to defend it anyway. Anyone who follows my channel regularly knows I was once a longtime fan of World of Warcraft. I started playing during the launch of Burning Crusade and quit during Warlords of Draenor. That entire time, I always wanted to own my own small plot of virtual property I could call my home. But sadly, that never happened. And no, garrisons don't count. WoW has an odd history with actual player housing. It was a concept Blizzard was working on before the release of vanilla, yet over the years the feature just kept getting tossed aside and ignored. If you want to know the full story on the matter, you can check out this video by Hayven Games. I'll post a link in the description below. Anyway, around the time WoD was released, Blizzard's official opinion on player housing was far from positive. They didn't believe it had any value because, in their minds, it served no purpose. That's why garrisons were created, a sort of alternative to proper housing.
Really, there's, when you think about traditional MMO housing, you think more in terms of, decorating things and that kind of artistic expression and less about gameplay. Whereas garrisons are more about living out the fantasy of a Warcraft strategy game with, building a base and building your buildings that feels, in a lot of ways, more appropriate to World of Warcraft than picking your curtains and your carpets.
I love how Tom here dismisses the act of decorating a house like it's a stupid, frivolous activity, something totally unbefitting of the World of Warcraft. Yet a silly little toy box that contains over 200 novelty items is perfectly acceptable to exist within his savage war game. I don't understand the logic behind this mentality, but whatever. Now, I did enjoy garrisons in the beginning, before I got to fully experience how truly awful they were. But I think most of my enthusiasm for garrisons stemmed from my desperation for real player housing. Even over time, as the cracks began to show, I was still mostly hesitant to call garrisons a total failure. I was hoping beyond all hope that this strange experiment would somehow succeed, and more importantly, evolve over time. Strictly speaking, in relation to my topic today, garrisons had two major flaws. They essentially offered players nothing in the way of customization, and they had far too much functionality. Basically, they were the exact opposite of typical player housing. Every WoW player owned a boring military base that looked the same. They were tiny, self-contained, single-player capital cities. They served as questing hubs, auction houses, mailboxes, and so on. They provided materials, epic gear, experience, and even gold. Garrisons were highly destructive to the MMO environment. Once you got your hands on one, you had the option to step outside it, but you never really needed to. Staying locked up like a hermit didn't really hinder your character's progression much, if at all. Ultimately, even though they're not the same thing, the failure of garrisons is now commonly used as an argument against player housing. That's a shame, because housing was already a polarizing subject. It didn't need any additional bad publicity. Now, there's a wide variety of housing systems on the market. Every game that offers this feature does so in its own unique way. I'm going to go out on a limb though, and guess that most MMOs deliver housing in an instanced form. This, of course, removes players from the open world, and that tends to be the #1 complaint made by people who oppose it. But instancing by itself isn't inherently bad. Single-player scenarios, for example, can provide some great opportunities for compelling gameplay, and they can be amazing tools for in-depth storytelling. So hating player housing simply because it takes players out of the open world temporarily is a very close-minded point of view. A good housing system needs to be 100% optional content, not forced upon the player base like Warcraft garrisons were. And ultimately, the less functionality they serve, the better off they're guaranteed to be. That's not to say all functionality is bad. It can be done right in certain regards. Developers just need to be extremely cautious with every step they take. Giving housing a purpose beyond simple vanity has the potential to become really problematic. WildStar has these things called expeditions, which are essentially mini dungeons you can place in your housing plots. Now, I haven't played the game yet, so I can't really comment on this too much, but from what I understand, they allow you to invite friends to your home so you can run expeditions together. These mini dungeons don't really reward you with experience or loot, they give you additional housing items instead. Again, I'm only going off of what I learned online. I haven't experienced this feature personally, and I might have been misinformed. But if this is truly how WildStar expeditions work, well then that sounds like an amazing bit of functionality, and perfect for the MMO environment. At this point though, some of you might be wondering why I'd even want player housing in my MMORPG. Well, because player housing goes hand in hand with the RPG portion of the genre. It's a role-playing game. Even if you don't engage in the physical act of role-playing, that RPG element still means something. Your character's life is enriched by this feature. It helps the world feel tangible and personalized, and believe it or not, that translates into a better gaming experience for you. These days, leveling a character from 1 to max level in almost every MMO is a relatively short experience. Gear is constantly getting outdated and replaced. At the end of the day, your enjoyment of a game is essentially nothing more than happy memories. So what's left to hold on to? What has real lasting power? The notoriety you gained from various factions, the special toys you've collected, the titles and achievements you've earned. Lasting proof that your character is a living, breathing part of the world he or she inhabits. Player housing is like the pinnacle of that ideal. I know some of you are saying, I'd rather sacrifice the RPG element before the MMO part of the genre. Well, if done right, no one has to sacrifice anything. You can have your cake and eat it too. Imagine forming a raid group to storm a castle. Your ultimate goal is to kill the evil king who sits upon the throne. Once he's disposed of, the group gets to roll for the gear he drops. In addition to this standard reward, everyone also gets a chance to roll for the throne itself, so it can be placed in the winner's home. That's not even a drastic change. All I did was add some furniture to the loot table. But now running this raid is more appealing to homeowners, and perhaps even to some players who previously didn't care about raiding before. Taking a look at housing in Rift, I think Tryon World's got a lot of things right. I'd really be hard-pressed to find anything to complain about here. Your plots are called dimensions, and they range wildly in size and appearance. Some contain pre-existing buildings you can furnish, while others are blank slates, allowing you to build homes out of scratch with various building blocks. The items you place in your dimension aren't confined to any sort of grid or hook system. You can merge items together, push them through solid objects, leave them floating in midair. The customization is unbelievable. My transition from Garrisons to this was a major shock, just mind-blowing beyond words. There's a legitimate reason to invite friends, guildmates, hell, even strangers into your home. Each dimension is truly unique. There isn't a single one that's identical to another, beyond the core map that players choose to build upon. If you decide to open your home to the public, it can be easily accessed through the Dimension directory, allowing other players to visit your creation and even raid it if they like. None of my crummy screenshots are really going to do Dimensions any justice. You've really got to see these things in motion. There's a great YouTube channel that regularly showcases high-quality Dimensions for everyone to see. They're typically grouped together by some sort of common theme. It's called Dimension Gallery, and I'll post a link in the description below. Rift Dimensions don't keep players away from the world, they give them numerous reasons to venture into it. Players get decorations and other household items from killing random enemies, participating in rifts, and seasonal holiday events. Dimension items can be rewarded for completing achievements, or they can even be fished up from the open water. Completing rare artifact sets can unlock dimension items for purchase. There's even an entire profession devoted to the creation of both dimension items and dimension maps themselves. If you enjoy the housing system in Rift, you need to stay active in the world to fully benefit from it. And building a 5-star residence isn't cheap. Dimensions can turn into hefty gold sinks, or rather, platinum sinks. If you're not outright buying in-game currency with real-life money, you're gonna need to hit the streets to collect cash the hard way. Questing, grinding, whatever means necessary to pay the bills. No doubt, some of you believe that if housing must exist in an MMORPG, it shouldn't go beyond guild housing. I'm only mentioning this because I strongly disagree with it. Guild housing is fantastic in theory. It should bring guildmates together and give them a common goal to work towards. I have no problem with it being a part of my game, but I also want personal housing on the side. Guild housing is a shared space. It doesn't give individual players a definitive sense of ownership or control. Married couples have a hard enough time deciding how to decorate their homes in real life, and that's just two people. I can only imagine how awful that kind of drama is inside a full-size guild. I'm picturing nonstop anger and bitter compromise. But then again, maybe I've just been hanging around the wrong kind of guildies lately. Some people will never accept player housing. No matter what I say, they'll forever think it's not only pointless, but detrimental to the game. Thankfully, some developers decided to forge ahead anyway, regardless of the critics. So in a game like Rift, I'll always have a place to call my home. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.